Coming up to 7:06 on CJAD, welcome to today's Entrepreneur, presented by Fuller Landau, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with Fuller Landau's Josh Miller. How are you, Josh?
Excellent, Dan.
And this evening, our profiled entrepreneur is Leclair of Vicone Rubber. Eric, how are you?
Good evening. Thank you. Very well.
So welcome to the program, and we usually start by just telling us a bit about your business. So tell us about Vicone Rubber.
Vicone Rubber, we've been around for a little bit over 9 years, specializing in rubber gaskets and seals, so molded and extruded, all done as per the customer's request or our design. So design, optimization, prototyping, anything that has to do with the development of the product all the way to production.
What type of industries does it usually serve?
Various industries. We can serve the lighting industry, trucks, automotive to a certain extent, aerospace, medical, biotech. Rubber seals and gaskets are very close to everywhere.
Everybody needs some rubber. That's what you're saying.
Most people do.
Excellent. So now let's take that 9-year step back and kind of let us know how you got into Vicone, or how it got started. Where was your background? Was it in this business? What kind of happened?
I've got quite a bit of background in the rubber business. I was working for another rubber company for a good 5 years. Worked my way up from quality into sales, into purchasing, took care of production, and throughout that whole process, probably about 4 years in, I started to think, well, this is probably something I'd like to do on my own. And it took me about 3 years to finally come around and do something about it, being prodded on by one of my mentors back in the day. And it was an interesting process to go through, just to actually get to the point where I said, you know what, I've got to do this on my own.
Did you basically get fed up and, things were out of your control? You saw that things could be done better and they were going nowhere. So you said, I can't stay.
Yes, absolutely. That's right on the mark, actually. I think when you start realizing that things aren't going your way and you get very frustrated by a lot of stuff going on in big business mostly, and some small businesses as well, and I've got a pretty hard head, so I like doing things my own way to a certain extent. So the only way to do them yourself really is to have your own company.
So you're venturing off. You're starting off Vicone. What's the first steps? I mean, you haven't never owned your company before. You haven't really been the entrepreneur, although I'm sure you've been making decisions quite along the way in your previous employment. What are the first steps, and are you doing this alone?
Well, the first steps is just a lot of research to try and find out what kind of resources are out there to help you start your business, whether it be financially or just administratively, with different types of business plans out there or resources that are available locally through the government and stuff like that. So there's quite a bit of groundwork to do in the beginning to make sure that you're well prepared.
Let's talk about business plans, because some people overlook them. A lot of everybody's aware of them. Not everybody wants to do them, even though they're a very important aspect, and not just for banks and financing, but for yourself, for the entrepreneur, him or herself. It's a great plan. It's a great guideline to work with. Tell us your experience with a business plan. Were you familiar with one? Did you absolutely insist when you were going in that you needed one? Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, I've got a love-hate relationship with business plans. It's definitely a very value-added process to go through, and I wouldn't recommend anyone starting a business without one. That being said, it's a very arduous process. It's long, and it takes a lot of hours to put a really good one together. Depending on what industry you're in and the kind of market research you have available to you, it's definitely worth going through all the due diligence to make sure that you're actually putting together something that's viable. We had a lot of help in the beginning. I actually started the business with a partner back then. And we had a lot of help through the CLD locally in the Merci de Montagne to help us get through the first steps and how to create a business plan with templates and resources and stuff like that. So yeah, it's definitely an important part of starting a business.
Did you monitor the business plan? Did you kind of check it or validate it over the first little while of your business? Or did you draft it and kind of run from there?
A little bit of both. In small business, things change fast. So what you think you're starting out with might not necessarily be what actually happens 6 months down the road, let alone 3 years. So going through the whole process, yes, we look back on it every now and again to see where we were, to check to make sure that, okay, well, we're still making money, which was the thing that we checked the most often. Mm-hmm. Not so much market share and stuff like that, or, I was more concerned with the bottom line than following the business plan. The business plan was a guide, and it was a business model that we were using to run the company.
It's interesting. You're talking about things that you measure, and what you measured at the inception of your business. Are they different than what you measure today? Like, are you looking at your certain aspects, financial or otherwise, today that are different than 9 years ago?
I wouldn't say they're different. I'd say they're just more complex. Being a smaller company, you can get away with just by looking at the bank statement at the end of the month and say, okay, well, we've made money.
Yeah.
When you get a little further on and you get more employees, more overhead, capital investments, and all that fun stuff, then the accounting part takes over and makes things a little bit more complex. So it's a little harder to measure things in the literal sense because it takes more work. But with a good accounting system and a good accountant, obviously, makes those things a lot easier. So there's more things being measured, but ultimately it's the same thing. At the end of the line, are we making money?
Now, let's take a step back. You started with a partner. How did you find this person? Were you guys on the same page? Tell us a little bit about your beginning experience with starting off with a new partner.
Well, starting out the company, I actually approached one of my old employees who worked at the other rubber company that I worked at, and I pitched him and asked him if he wanted to start a company with me, and went from there.
Did you guys have to invest money, or it was just really time and effort?
Both. All the above. Yeah, everything was proportionate to the amount of shares that were part of the business deal, really.
Now, were you guys did you have the same vision? Were you on the same page? Did you complement each other? Or were you overlapping quite a bit?
There was some overlap in the beginning in terms of skill set. We both had sales background, which is a good thing. When you're starting out a new business, you want to make sure that you have that tool to go and get more sales. And we started out, we were two. So that being said, you need to make sure that both of you are working towards the same goal. And we did have complementary skill sets. My old partner had some quality background that I didn't have. And a lot of the small business aspects is wearing a lot of hats. So a lot of general skill sets in terms of nothing too deep in terms of experience, but enough to get around.
Did you say your old partner?
My old partner, yes.
So that first or initial partner is no longer a partner.
That's correct.
Did you have a shareholders agreement?
Yes, we did.
Did you live by the shareholders agreement?
We didn't need to use it.
It was just kind of, you figured out your way around it without it.
Well, basically, when it came time to part ways, I just went and saw him and said, well, I'd like to buy you out, and here's what I'd like to give you for it. And he agreed. So we didn't need to go into the whole legality of shareholders agreement and stuff.
But important to set up was it difficult to set up a shareholders agreement at the outset?
On the outside, it was actually pretty easy. Really, you just need a good lawyer to guide you through it. And Robert Fagui from Prévost Fortin Daou is the guy who I've been with since inception of the company, and is a great lawyer, and really helped us talk through it and get through all the nitty-gritty and make sure that it was fair for both of us.
I would imagine communication, certainly with your partner, employees, and anybody, is key. Did you have that communication properly established with your partner?
In terms of?
In terms of anything, whether it's day-to-day, whether it's vision, whether it's sharing ideas.
For the most part, yeah. Up until the point where I bought him out, where that's where I think our visions kind of really didn't take the same turn. We had just finished buying our building. There was a lot more on the line. I felt that we needed to push a little harder and work a little harder, and I think that's where we decided that it was time to go.
Today's Entrepreneur on CJAD 800 with Eric Leclair of Vicone Rubber. More with Eric in just a moment. 7:19 on CJAD 800. Today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. Dan Delmar and Josh Miller of Fuller Landau with you, and our guest Eric Leclair of Vicone Rubber. And Eric, we're talking about your business, so very specialized, of course. How has government helped? And is there a lot of help out there for people who are in this kind of very specialized business in terms of programs, in terms of grants?
The government's helped quite a bit. there's quite a lot of programs out there, not just for specialized company. I think for most companies here in Quebec, whether it be through Finance Économie Québec, which was the old MDAIE, Centre Local de Développement (CLDs), even the Canadian government has some programs that are available that could make a real impact in terms of kind of investments that you're going to make in your company.
Do you find you have to fit within their specific box of criteria before you get $1, or do you find them flexible? Do you find them working with you?
Oh, they're very inflexible. You've really got to fit in the box, and if you don't, you're not getting anything. It can be a very frustrating process because for the longest time, every time we'd meet one of their new criterias, they'd change them. For exports, amount of sales required, all kinds of crazy stuff. So just when you think you're about to be eligible to get a bursary, they change the numbers on you. So it was a little aggravating. It took us a good 2 years before we could actually get into a position where we could benefit from some of these programs. Unfortunately, a lot of the programs benefit a lot of the more mature businesses. So any businesses under $1 million in sales, unfortunately, aren't well served by some of those programs. You'll get better served by a Centre Local de Développement (CLD) with different kind of programs that they might have to help startups.
And you're dealing with government contacts direct. You're not really dealing through consultants very much.
No, we deal directly through with the government representatives in our area.
And what about R&D? A lot of people, and certainly in your business where you're designing, you're developing a little bit, how have you used R&D tax credits to your benefit or not?
We used to do R&D tax credits and stuff like that, but the process became much too heavy for a company our size. Obviously, we called on consultants for that, and they'd take their percentage to file the programs for us, and we weren't really happy with the way things were going on. With the way things were being filed and the consultant that we were actually using. So we've actually decided, and we've been doing this for the past probably 4 or 5 years, is actually do the R&D work, do the development of the products, and actually charge the customer the expertise so they can actually go in and get their R&D credits on their side.
It's interesting that it's so many entrepreneurs are saying, let's kind of bring it to our own bottom line and go through all the hassle and headache and report writing. I'm talking about the R&D, the shred type credits. And you kind of turn that around and say, hey, you know what, customer, this is our value added. You can add more to your bottom line. You go out and get the R&D because you're already, in a sense, doing it. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, they're developing a product. So rubber is one of the components that goes into that product. So they're going to have anywhere from 2, 3 to 200, 2,000 components in which they're going to be working on for R&D, and their system's already set up to go get those R&D credits.
And it's actually great from a marketing perspective as well, I would imagine. And when we come back from the break, we'll talk a little bit about marketing with Eric.
Eric Leclair of Vicone Rubber, our guest on today's Entrepreneur. It's 7:23 on CJAD 800. 7:25 on today's Entrepreneur. Our guest is Eric Leclair of Vicone Rubber. And Josh, we talk a bit about marketing?
Marketing, certainly new businesses, startup, you have your limited budgets because everybody has to really watch where they spend all their dollars to get their bottom line. So maybe you can give us a little bit of an evolution of your marketing plans, Eric, from the beginning kind of up until now.
Well, it's changed quite a bit. I mean, when you're a small company, obviously every dollar counts, and you're trying to stretch that dollar as far as you can. Our marketing per se wasn't really marketing in the purest form in the beginning. It was really passive. We were looking at the internet, and we were buying up AdWords and doing search engine optimization, and we were able to grow quite a bit just based on that. So we would wait for the people to call or an email, and obviously we did some prospecting in the beginning and did a lot of work up front, cold calling, and a lot of cold calling and more cold calling. Yeah. But after you get your little base there and you're going, and we just let that go for a good 5 years, 6 years.
Did you have experience with SEO and AdWords and all that? Did you outsource it? How did you figure that out?
For the most part, we outsourced it. I mean, I'm a really true big believer in getting the right people doing the right jobs. and I know enough about SEO and SEM to get me into trouble and spend a lot of money and waste it. So ever since we started business, we've always relied on really good partners to help us with the stuff that we're not good with. I mean, we ask our customers to rely on us for high performance rubber parts and the design and development of those parts.
So that was organic for, as you say, 5 years or so. Then how did it change? What did you change as far as your efforts, your slogans, your taglines, what do you portray to people, and how do you get to them? What's kind of changed?
Well, 3 years ago we did a complete rebranding. Changed the logo, changed the taglines, changed the website, and became more aggressive or more proactive, if you would, in the marketing, going to get new customers. Instead of waiting for people to call us and not doing any filtering whatsoever, we would actually filter ahead of time and target customers that we wanted to speak with, and we'd go that route.
Focus groups. You ever use focus groups? Do you ever kind of test out your ideas with anybody before you actually launch them?
From a marketing standpoint, we basically rely on experience. We're still a small company, so focus groups for us, we'll leave that to J&J and all the big pharmaceuticals. But having a marketing expert with us as a consultant in the beginning, and now someone full time dedicated to marketing, makes a very big difference as well.
No, I think that's hugely important. Now, as businesses coming in, and kind of we put marketing, I'm looking at sales, and as a small business, I kind of wonder, and I've asked this question to a few entrepreneurs before, it's hard to say no to customers when you're starting out. Have you ever said no to a customer?
A few times, yeah.
Can you remember one of the first times you said no, when you decided, hey, you know what, I'm tired of dropping my pants, I'm tired of giving this stuff away?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question, actually, because one of the first guys we hired on was Norm. He's our tech specialist now. Back then, he was taking care of sales, and one of the accounts that he was having a real hard time with, they were pushing us on delivery, pushing us on quality, pushing us on price. They were continually pushing, and he was having a rough time, and they were starting to get a little aggressive with him. And after a few phone calls and a few steamy phone calls from him, and I could hear it, he was sitting right beside me, I told Norm, I said, you know what, just tell him to go buy his stuff elsewhere. Obviously, there's not a fit between our two companies, and he'll be probably better served by someone else.
And that was something that's kind of hard to do when you're a small business and you're scratching for every top line dollar.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it was a decent account back then. We were talking about $10,000-$15,000, which was nothing too shabby, really. But it gets to a certain point where the amount of energies that you're expending aren't worth what you're getting in return. And if we can't meet our customers' expectations, then we get a bad rap in the industry, and we have a really good reputation. We don't want to dirty it for anyone. So if we're not going to be able to serve someone to their expectations, we're just better off not serving them.
Eric Leclair, our guest of Vicone Rubber on Today's Entrepreneur. More after the break at 7:30. 7:36 on Today's Entrepreneur, inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar and Fuller Landau's Josh Miller with you. And our guest is Eric Leclair of Vicone Rubber. And, he sells rubber. And it's a very specialized business, like we were saying. So that, of course, leads us to the people of Vicone Rubber. A specialized business requires specialized people. So what kind of people are you attracted to in terms of your hiring? And what qualities do you look for in employees, Eric?
Well, the most important part to hiring someone, in my opinion, is to have someone whose values match your own. Pertinent experience, obviously, is always an added bonus, but really it's a lot easier to show someone how to do something than to change their attitude. So having a positive attitude, being creative, passionate, all very important things at Vicone.
Do you try and make sure that your vision and that passion really permeates throughout, so that a culture develops within Vicone itself?
Absolutely.
Is it difficult?
Yes and no. I mean, we're a small team, so any small thing that happens really affects the culture or the mood. So it's really important for us to make sure to try and make sure that the environment is pleasant for everyone. So anyone who gets hired at Vicone goes through usually just a 1-day training just on Vicone. The values, the company, where we came from, who we are, where we're going, above and beyond any of the other stuff that they need to learn starting at Vicone.
even though you are a small business, you have under 10 employees. Do you still, go through formal evaluations?
Oh yeah,
The policy
absolutely.
manuals. Like, do you still have your formalities? Even
Very important. Yeah, we actually hired on a consultant a few years back to make sure that we were well structured from an HR standpoint. We do know that it is the biggest challenge for most businesses, if not all businesses. So we actually have a really good partner in our area with the Quebec government, Emploi Québec, and François Boilly, who really helped us out a lot and still does. I mean, when I went to him and said, well, we want to do an employee manual, and we were 4, he looked at me and he was like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah. We need an employee manual. We need the people who are starting to come on board to really understand what we are, who we are, what we're about, and what's expected of them in terms of performance, in terms and what they can expect from us in terms of evaluations, in terms of bonuses, in terms of structure, in terms of all the terms that you really want to know about your business.
Now let's shift gears a little bit. We're talking small business. We're talking getting off the ground, finding sales, managing, and of course financing, the dollars. You need money to operate. Let's talk a little bit about financing Vicone.
Do we have to?
Let's talk about your love affair or love-hate relationships with the banks.
I love my bank, just for the record.
Sure you do.
Right, just like he loves his kids. So tell us a little bit. From the beginning, did you really get involved? What was your first experience with financing? What was your last experience with financing? How has that differed? What have you learned?
Oh, geez, it's run the gamut, really. We've had financing pretty much since the inception of Vicone. In the beginning, we were partnered with the BDC, who were the only people who would touch us, and probably the only government body that will actually touch a startup. So they helped us out a lot in the beginning, and they've been with us ever since through the purchase of our building, the industrial condo that we're in now, and other various projects that we've had. We've always pretty much grown organically up until the past 3 years. So checking our cash flow, make sure that's positive, and reinvesting that in the company to grow.
So BDC was really term financing. It was never really financing your working capital per se.
Exactly.
So now you're getting to a point where, well, maybe we should finance working capital.
Well, what's transpired in the past 2 years is we've actually went out and got a line of credit. And that has been one of the most arduous tasks I've ever done as an entrepreneur. Going to get sales, hard, yes. Getting financing for a small business, harder. It was quite the feat and a lot of work and a lot of hours, and it took us 4 tries to get it.
What was some of either the lessons you learned or the hardest part, or what was the toughest brick wall that you had to face with that?
Oh, geez.
I mean, was it a question of convincing the banks, that it's not risky? Was it trying to say, hey, your heart and soul have been in this for a while? I mean, you've been profitable since inception. So where did you find the hardest uphill battle?
It was convincing them that there was little or no risk. I mean, they're really risk averse. Coming out of the recession 2008 2009, there wasn't a lot of leeway with regards to ratios and stuff like that. So when you put your numbers forward, they look at them. Okay, they're good, but not good enough. Especially being a small business, there's more risk involved, obviously, for them. So it was a lot of dog and pony shows, a lot of trying to sell the business to them, and we finally hit on a bank that understood, that decided to back us.
Excellent. You mentioned recession. Did recession have effect on your business?
Yes and no, to a certain extent. I mean, we've always had organic growth, and we've always grown at a steady pace and a healthy pace. That year, 2008, 2009, we actually had 0 growth, which was the first year in Vicone's history that we didn't grow. So, yes, there was an impact, but seeing as our customers are in various industries, various sizes, geographically located all over North America, for us, the impact wasn't as big as possibly a lot of our competitors or other businesses.
Now you mentioned geographic areas. Your customers are a little bit everywhere. Your suppliers, I imagine, are in a number of different places too.
Yep.
What parts of the world do you operate in?
Well, all of our subcontracting is done, for the most part, here in Canada, Quebec, the States, and Asia.
Asia. So that must be an experience.
It is. It is.
What have you learned? Like, how long have you been working with Asia? I presume China, for the most part.
Yeah. We've been doing business with our Chinese suppliers ever since inception, so 9 years. We've been doing business with the same Chinese suppliers since then. We really believe in building partnerships and building strong relationships that will last. And we have worked with them through the 9 years, and we'll continue working with them to continue that relationship.
So your liver's gotten used to the Mau Tai or fire water.
Oh, geez, you never get used to that.
What have you, I guess from the time you started working with Chinese suppliers 9 years ago to today, what have you changed? What have you improved? What have you learned?
We've used a lot more paperwork and increased our communication and the depth and breadth of what we're communicating to them with regards to our requirements for our customers. Really important. Communication is key in a North American business, even more so when it's being translated into another language like Chinese. You go to China, and even some Chinese don't understand between themselves when they're speaking Chinese. So it's been a big challenge, or the biggest challenge, I think, in dealing with Chinese suppliers is that communication barrier, at least in our case.
And keeping your feet on the ground. How often do you visit, or how often do you try to have people on the ground in China?
We've been there 2 times in the past year. Typically we'll go there every 6 months or year. I've been there 5 times myself. Our operations guy's been there twice. So we try and keep good contact with them, and unlike doing business with your suppliers here in North America, the personal relationship there is very important. So that face-to-face time really does do a lot for your business.
And I think that's huge. I mean, communication with everybody is huge, and I think that's a lesson that you learn. Thank you very much, Eric. I know as we come up to the next part of the show, one area we didn't touch upon is IT, which of course is a huge part of Eric's business, certainly when you're communicating with overseas, but also with every entrepreneur.
And how to take your business with you when you travel. That's coming up on today's Entrepreneur. It's 7:45. 7:48 on today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. Dan Delmar and Fuller Landau's Josh Miller with you, and our guests this evening, Eric Leclair of Vicone Rubber, and we'll also welcome back Kevin Ammerman, IT Director at Fuller Landau. How are you, Kevin?
Fine, thank you.
Good. So we want to talk about traveling, and Eric travels a lot. So how do you take your office with you? And Josh, that's a very common challenge for a modern entrepreneur.
And certainly when you're traveling to China, and Eric's done that, and I've done that a little bit before. It's, well, how do you also make sure information is secure and make sure you're logging in, and it's not like the old dial-up from the 1990s and how it's working well. So maybe, Kevin, you can enlighten us on what is the best for today and what works.
Well, what works? The question is sort of what's going to keep you secure. And I guess the rule of thumb is if you're crossing any border, you got to worry a little bit about the security of your information, because crossing any border anywhere, those border agents have rights to seize your stuff. Okay, so whether it be a laptop or a cell phone or anything like this, they have various rights to search and seize things. And you got to make sure that well, you might not be getting that equipment back for some time. So if you have important information on there, you got to make sure it's copied someplace else, and you got to make sure that you're ready to carry on and get past that.
Now, what about connecting? Like, what? Let's assume you've crossed the border. Okay, nobody has taken you. You haven't been profiled, and nobody's taken your goods. You're working in this foreign land. How best to stay connected?
Well, that's really the trick. Is the connections are sometimes a little bit hard to come by. So you got to have a fallback plan. So most traveling business people these days have either some sort of webmail, or maybe they have a VPN system to get back into their office.
What exactly is a VPN system?
VPN, it's a virtual private network. What it does is it lets you work on your laptop outside of your office as if you were inside your office, which is very convenient and gives you access to all the regular features that you have in your office. But it requires a pretty persistent connection. And in a lot of cases, when you're traveling, especially in Asia, those connections are filtered. They won't let you make those kind of connections back to your office.
Even in Starbucks?
Even in Starbucks.
It's Wi-Fi everywhere.
In Starbucks, even a local Starbucks, that's a really good example of a place where you should be using a VPN to protect your information, because it encrypts all the data. But yeah, in some places they won't let you connect in that fashion, and it forces they're trying to get a better look at what you're sending back and forth to your home office, is what it boils down to.
Do you need any specific hardware or software in your own business?
Usually, most modern computers come with Windows, which is capable of connecting to VPN pretty much out of the box. And then your home office, you're going to need some sort of VPN router. So yeah, usually there's some sort of hardware involved to set up a small office.
Eric, what have been your experiences when you're traveling in China? Have you been fortunate enough to be able to log on easily? Have you gone through some hellish experiences?
I've seen it all. Depending on which hotel you're in and the kind of
Yeah.
infrastructure they have for the internet is basically the key ingredient to actually connecting properly. If you've got a crappy internet connection, you're not going to be able to connect. I use VPN, so I need a solid connection when I'm going online. I don't keep anything on my laptop. Everything's in my office on the server. So if my laptop does get confiscated, then I can get a new one and still have all my information and still be able to connect. The key is the internet connection, and I've been to some pretty shady places where it is a fax line in the background, and it's not fun.
Are you concerned about security as well? The people kind of stealing?
Oh yeah,
documents?
absolutely. I was in China last month, and I was Skyping with my girlfriend, and 2 days later, she got a request from some guy out of China to link to her profile, and that's your secure network in China.
Sounds like it's can be a little bit sketchy and a little bit tough at times. And I think there's other areas that I'm sure businesses can and entrepreneurs can do to tighten up their security a little bit, make sure that between their hardware and their software is really good to go, certainly when you're traveling to far off lands. And when we come back, we'll explore a little more with Kevin.
Today's Entrepreneur on CJAD 800 with Eric Leclair of Vicone Rubber and Kevin Ammerman, IT Director at Fuller Landau. More after the break at 7:53. Remaining moments on today's Entrepreneur with our guests Eric Leclair of Vicone Rubber and Kevin Ammerman, IT Director at Fuller Landau. And for people who travel a lot like Eric, we're talking about taking your business with you abroad. And Kevin, what about mobile versus your traditional laptop? Which is more secure, and can people hack into your cell phone and retrieve documents and sensitive information the same way they can on your laptop?
You got to treat your mobile devices pretty much like a computer these days, and people often don't appreciate that it's just as important to put passwords and security on your phones and your Blackberries and your iPads and all these things. It's just as important because you have access to the same information that you do from a regular laptop. It's a little bit trickier. If someone steals a laptop, it's you can take it into any Best Buy and get the data off the hard drive. But cell phones and mobile devices are a little trickier, but it is still possible to get information off of them, especially if they're not locked in the first place.
And what other areas can entrepreneurs, when they're traveling, other than locking up their laptops and, passwords. Let's talk passwords for a second. How important are passwords to maintain and keep and go and change and do?
Exceptionally important, and especially when you're traveling. We've had reports of people's passwords being sniffed, being taken while they're using online services, for example, webmail clients and things like this. Their passwords can be picked up while they're being used. It's important to be conscious of the data that you're transferring, even when you're using a password, and keep those passwords, fresh. Change them every once in a while. Not necessarily every month or every week or anything like this, but change them occasionally. Try to use different passwords for different services to try and segment the different aspects of your life. So to try to keep at least your business and your personal stuff separated, so that if one password gets lost or compromised, you can carry on with the rest of your life.
And don't use 1111 as a password.
Some places don't even allow 111
Our,
or
our,
1234.
our phone system got hacked, believe it or not.
Really?
Yep.
Now, how can you tell? Sometimes you can get hacked and not even know about it. Is there any way to test to see if somebody's entered your system without your knowledge?
It really depends on the system that you're talking about. So the example of the phone system, again, it's a computer-based phone system, and people managed to dial in through a backdoor in the system. And it wasn't until the next bill arrived that Eric noticed some red flags going off, and he had to call in the pros to get that locked down. And as I recall, it took some time and several conversations with the telephone company to get all those charges reversed.
We were actually pretty lucky. They told us some horror stories about some companies that happened to, and I think our bill only ended up being like $800 or something like that. But there were stories of $10,000, $15,000. So one of the first questions they asked was, "What's your password on your voicemail? Is it 1111?" I never thought that our phone system could get hacked.
Nice and simple.
Yes.
And speaking about traveling and mobile devices and smartphones, I guess there's also, from a cost perspective, there's the plans. Roaming charges can be an absolute fortune.
Again, there's a shock when you get the bill. So it's usually a few weeks after your trip. You get home, get that bill, and it's a disaster. Again, the cell phone companies have heard all the stories before of
Yeah.
my kid was using it and things like this.
They don't care.
No, they don't care. No, the bill's going to stick. And it's think ahead. Call your mobile carrier and see if they have some sort of roaming package for you, and get them to explain approximately what it's going to cost if you do end up checking your email. Or actually, what seems to get most people is using maps abroad. Downloading those maps really uses up a lot of data, and that gets very expensive.
So basically, plan ahead, make sure things are secure, good passwords, and you got to make sure that that you're doing it smart and not just kind of not planned.
Yeah.
So as we approach the end of the show, I'll turn to Eric and ask him what would be one piece of advice, your piece of advice to today's entrepreneur?
Wow. One piece of advice, I think the most important advice that I could give anyone who's thinking about starting a business is to surround themselves with good people, accountants, lawyers, mentors. They're a dime a dozen in the sense that whenever you hear someone talk about them, they're everywhere. But when you really want to find someone good, it's really hard. And once you get those good people in place, they can really help leverage your ideas and your efforts to really bring them to fruition to where you want to go.
Excellent, thank you. And Dan, I'll tell you my takeaway, other than building on Eric's comment of having the right people around you, it's really being aware, being self-aware, and knowing what you don't know. You can't be a know-it-all. You might think you're a know-it-all, or your partner might think you're a know-it-all, or not. But it's really knowing your limitations and knowing that surrounding yourself with the people that can complement you will certainly help make yourself a success. And the last thing is discipline. It was kind of an undertone, but discipline in any business is huge. And I think Eric exemplified that this evening.
Thanks, Josh. Thank you, Eric. Leclair of Vicone Rubber and Kevin Ammerman, IT Director at Fuller Landau. Back next week, next Monday night at 7 p.m. on News Talk Radio, CJAD 800.